Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Jen with Jen's Whims. This is the other half. Okay, well, there have been a lot of comments on the Lightning F-150. I don't know any of the information, so that's why we are interviewing the man today, because he knows all the answers. So let's get into it. First question, Chad. We get a comment from Jacob. He says, I would like to say thanks for the video, but I would like to ask if the Texas heat has any impact on battery performance or range.
The heat, not so much. The cold definitely did. We bought the truck in February, so the new 2024s, I believe, are supposedly going to have heat pumps in them. I don't know if that happened or not with all the upset to electric vehicles, but that's what they were planning on doing, with at least with the F-150s. I don't know about the car. And so that should help with especially cold weather. But the heat really hasn't affected it that much. I mean, obviously running the AC, because it's almost 100 degrees every day, does affect, to a point. But you can actually go to into the truck, go to your basically battery usage for that trip, and it's still like 5 or 6% of the battery usage is actually the air conditioning. So it really hasn't affected it. And heat doesn't really affect the batteries because they are temperature controlled or regulated. So the heat really doesn't affect them. That's the cold. The cold affects the actual state of charge, the amount of charge you can fit into the battery, and again, because they are temperature controlled, it's not like your cell phone. They are temperature controlled by the truck, so it isn't as much as it could be, but it does. All of that does affect how much you can put in it and how much you can pull out, how quickly you can pull it out. So the cold has a lot more effect than the heat.
All right, this one isn't a question, but one was a comment from Puerto Rican Hammer. He says, I did a 300 plus video with my Lightning ER, and it's just an inconvenience for me trying to charge. I rent a vehicle when doing road trips. Great video.
Yeah, and that's always an option. I mean, before we did that trip with the truck, which it was probably close to 260 miles, something like that, for ours, so not quite 300. We could have made it the distance we were going, but we chose to charge because, for one thing, I'm used to having a gas truck that went like 500 miles, and so getting down to 50 miles to empty for me is kind of scary. So I'm just not used to it. I'm one of those people. It's like always keep your gas tank half full, and I try and do that with I charge every day, up to 80. But it is definitely, especially in Texas where we were going. If you're going to the city, it's really not a big deal because there's Tesla chargers at HEB, at Dick's Sporting Goods. There's all over the malls. So if you're going to a bigger town, bigger city where there's more of those vehicles, it's really not a problem. And they charge so fast if you can get one of those that works correctly, that you're talking 15, 20 minutes and you're back to a couple days worth of charge. So that is definitely one of the things. I mean, traveling with them, if taken to a long road trip, there's a guy that I've watched some of his videos. He's done a 4,000 mile road trip in his, and they planned it out. I mean, they brought a grill with them, and they were like making lunch in the back of the truck while it was charging. One of the little George Foreman grills kind of things. And so I mean, they made a trip out of it. But it definitely, traveling is something you're gonna have to think about, and you have to plan it, because you can't just find a gas station like you can every 15 miles. There's not a charging spot, especially if you're going out in the middle of nowhere. So I do totally understand that. I'm still not really happy with that, but for my day-to-day driving, what I do and what Jenny does, being able to come plug it at home.
They don't know what I have yet, Chad.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, so for our normal scheduling, I drive about 60 to 80 miles a day back and forth to work. And so for that, I mean, it saves you a bunch of money. It's a convenience, and not ever stop at a gas station if you don't want to, and you literally just plug it in at home. It's pretty nice. I have to get used to it. But definitely, yes, the range thing, the time on charging, and finding chargers is still a kind of a pain.
All right, next question is from Dylan Robinson. He says, also, what efficiency are you getting with that setup? Like, what's your average miles per kilowatt hour?
So my average, I looked the other day, total average, because I have on my dash, the screen pops up for this trip every time. So obviously it varies depending on where I'm going, what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff. But the average since I've owned the truck is 1.7. And I put those rims and tires on it um, before 1,000 miles. I've got almost 6 on it right now. But ultimately, I was getting 1.7 to 2 driving back and forth to work, because the road I drive on, it's 70 miles an hour and it's really hilly, very hilly, back and forth to work. So I was getting 1.7 to 2 miles a kilowatt hour. Now I'm usually like 1.5. So I lost 2 points of a mile, if you will, per kilowatt hour. So it did affect it a little bit, but again, for what I do, it's not that big of a deal.
So for those of us that are gas vehicles, what does that mean? Because we're used to, miles per gallon, and I can drive this many miles on 1 tank of gas. So what does the 1.5, 1.7, 2.0 kilowatt hours, what does that mean?
So the kilowatt hour, that's what you pay. You're charged, like we pay about 10 cents a kilowatt hour here. So basically that means that it costs me 10 cents to go 1.7 miles, or almost 2 miles. If your gallons of gas, the way you can calculate it is it costs, right now it's about $3 a gallon. So if you're only going 15 miles per gallon, you would basically divide that gallon, that $3 by 15, and you get how much it costs you per mile. The truck has 131 kilowatt hours of usable battery energy, and each vehicle is differ for that. So basically the way the computer calculates it is it guesses that you should get 1.7, let's say, miles per kilowatt hour. So it basically, you would take that 131 kilowatt hours and times it by 1.7, and that should tell you how far you can go.
Okay, so I have a calculator. So 131 times 1.7 is 222.
Yeah. So the truck claims it'll get like 320, but, and granted, again, if I'm driving in town, if I'm driving slower speeds, it's a lot higher than that. I mean, I'm driving around town, I'll get 5, miles a kilowatt hour, because all the stop and go. If you're driving the city, same thing. I mean, with all the stop and go, you're regenerating. So, but most of my driving is 75 miles an hour. So it's that higher speed with those tires, that rim setup, all that. You're not getting the mileage. We got on our trip we took. We got basically the range we had was 100 or 260 miles of range on that trip, with the types of driving that we were doing. Was what it regulated out to. So that's, like I said, that's the average for me is 107 or 1.7. But again, it just depends on the kind of driving you're doing. So I've seen guys that out of those trucks that claim they get 2.5 in the stock setup. I never got that. So I never got better than 2 doing the driving that I do. So
we live in the Texas Hill Country, and it's actual hills. So
yeah, it's not a flat highway.
And our highway is 75 miles per hour.
And that's one thing with any of the electric vehicles, the faster you're going, the less efficient they're going to be. Just because they're always having to keep the power output to keep you at that speed, because there's no gears. So normally a gas vehicle, you get into a higher gear, it's using less fuel. Whereas an electric vehicle, to keep you at that speed, it's expending that amount of power. So it's nice that there's no transmission, so you don't have to worry about those parts, and it's powered directly to the wheel. But that, if you had a way to downshift a gear and use less power just to cruise, or like the Rivians have the ability to disconnect, I believe it's the 2 rear motors and run off the front. They have like an eco mode. So if Ford came out with that, where you only use one of the motors, because it's a dual motor on all the trucks, you just use one of the motors just to maintain speed, it would also make it more efficient, so that both motors aren't having to expend that power. So maybe that'll come with an update. I don't know, maybe they'll have that on trucks going forward. I haven't seen anything that they will, but that's part of the nature. So like I said, if I'm below 60 miles an hour, then I'm, closer to 2 miles a kilowatt hour, or even above that. It's when you start going to 75, 80, then you really see a dip in it.
Dylan also commented, if you see, this was in regards to when we went, if you watch this video, the video that we're referring to all these comments to, which was the first road trip, 200 plus miles, we went to a Tesla charging station, but it said it was not compatible, not recommended. So his comment about that, Dylan, he says, if you see 150 kilowatt as at a Tesla charger, it is a V2 station. I don't know what V2 means. He says only V3 stations are compatible, and they will be listed at 250 kilowatts. So, good to know.
Yeah, and that was on the Ford app. So the app that, obviously Tesla has its own. We've downloaded that too. But Ford, I thought whenever we read that they opened up all the Tesla stations, but they're not. So trust the Ford app. If it tells you it's not going to work, it's not going to work, because that's the problem we had at
And
that
the
one.
app is Ford Pass.
Yeah, it's your normal. It's your standard Ford app. They've updated it, and it has the EV stuff on it now, so you can search for chargers. You can use your vehicle as well. But yeah, if they're saying it's not recommended or it's not going to work, it's probably not going to work.
Escobar 313 says, "What type of wheel and tire setup do you have? The other mods look great, also."
They're Nitto. It's Nitto Terra grapplers. They're $295. Ridge grapplers. Okay, they're $295. 70, I believe, are 18s. The tires.
Mm-hmm.
The rims are an 18-inch positive one offset, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Fuel
Coverts D694.
And that's the same rim I've had on the last 4 trucks I've owned. I like the way they look. There's a lot of options to offset. They have that bead locker look to them. I'm kind of like that style over the bigger 20-inch rims or 22-inch rims that even they come on the premiums. I just don't like. I never have liked that. So, and then I have a 2-inch leveling kit in the front end of it. That was the first thing we did.
Can you go higher than that, or are you pretty much just limited to the 2-inch level?
I'm sure you could find a puck, because basically the front end of that truck is no different than any other F-150, pretty much. It's a little more beefed up, but it's basically the same thing. The rear end is where it's completely different. So you could find it's basically they just put a spacer on top. It's basically an enclosed, and I'm not using the right terminology for it, but basically it's an enclosed shock. There's a spring over it, and so it bolts to the frame up in the top. They just basically put a puck you can get. I think there's a 1/2 inch lift, or there's the full true level, which is 2. And there's people that put 37-inch tires on these things, and with cutting and everything else, you could put bigger tires. This is the one. It's kind of the setup I'd seen other people do, and I didn't trim anything. So, and I don't really rub. If I'm articulating in a weird spot, it'll rub it on the fabric in the back. If I'm backing up and turning, but otherwise I don't have any rub at all. And that's why I almost went with 35s and figured I'd trim a little bit. The last truck I had, we had to trim quite a bit, so I'm not afraid of that. But you can do this pretty easily; they'll fit. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Then we put a bed topper on the back, did tint to it, ceramic tint, which that was a story, but. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's about all I'm going to do to it. I'm not planning on anything too crazy. Like I said, you can lift it a little more and put bigger tires on them, but you are definitely going to see the effect. It doesn't really affect the torque, because that truck has almost 800 foot-pounds of torque, so you don't feel the bigger tire. It'll still spin the tires with the tires I have on it. It'll spin all 4 of them. But again, just like it affects your gas. I mean, that's the thing people don't think about. If you put bigger tires on your truck, like the last truck I had was a 2019 F-150, and we put a 4-inch lift on it and the 35-inch by 12.5-inch tires, and I went from 19 miles a gallon down to like 14. So again, you don't think about it because it's got a 36 gallon gas tank, I think, and you just stop and fill up in 10 minutes, no big deal. So you don't notice that, you don't think about it. But when the range anxiety that people have with electric cars, it feels like it's a bigger deal. The reality of it is it costs you less money day to day because I'm paying so little for power at my house. Now, that's one thing too, when you're driving and you're going on a trip, it is more expensive than charging at your house. It's a lot more expensive. And you don't know what you're going to pay. Well, the app tells you what you're going to pay.
It's like quadruple the price?
Oh yeah, it was 60 cents a kilowatt hour at that Ford place we stopped at. Most Tesla chargers that we've used have been like 40. Chevy, yeah. Most Tesla chargers we've used have been like 44 cents a kilowatt hour, 40 something like that. But yeah, it's definitely more. It's not more than gas, but it's closer to gas. So just be aware of that. But there again, I probably take 2 road trips a year compared to day-to-day driving, and again, I spend about $2.50 a day to $3 a day. Not even three, $2.50 to $2.80, depending on what I've driven that day, charging it every day. So compared to $50 to $60 a week I was spending, so I spend basically a month now what I used to spend in gas in a week. Anyway.
PT6998 says Tesla stations need to be 250 kilowatt plus superchargers for non-Teslas. Honestly, it would be nice just to open all of them up. Imagine going to a gas station and it's saying only works for Chevy brand.
So they very likely are correct with that. I haven't researched with which ones. I just read the article that said they were opening all of the network up. And maybe they're doing it in phases. I know he just fired the whole crew that was doing that a couple weeks back. So maybe that they're revamping it. I don't know what their plan is really with that. But I know the one that we've used at the Rim, I think is only 150 kilowatt, and it's worked. So I'd have to do more research. Like I said, I'm not an authority on that. So they very likely are correct.
Infrastructure definitely has room for improvement. Once anybody can charge anywhere, that would be great.
Well, and that's the problem though. Is it's supply and demand. How many cars are there on the road that need gas? That's why there's so many gas stations. There's still where we live. It's a rarity to see a Tesla. I mean, I've seen probably 3 or 4 Lightning since I bought my truck. So still have yet to see in our town a Cybertruck. I mean, we just saw a semi-load of them driving down the road the other day, but there's just not a lot of demand. And I'm seeing more and more Teslas. I'm seeing more and more EVs, and of course, with that more demand, people will pay to put them on. So, but there again, everybody, all the articles and everything are either making it about, political side you're on or whatever it is, or they're saying all the negatives and not the positives. And that's where people have to experience it for themselves and give it a try. And for me, I'll never go back. I like gas cars too. I had a big, 5.0 super loud Mustang. I've had big jacked up trucks. It's not that I don't like those things, but just the way that the EVs perform, they're clean. There's no vibrations. There's no sound. They're all of that. Everything about them, just the way they're built, is just
like no maintenance. Like the only maintenance you have to do is like an update.
Well, and if you rotate the tires, get a little fuel, your fluid levels checked. But yeah, there's no oil changes. There's no any of that kind of stuff. So that's another cool thing.
ELP Media says, I stress over running low on gas. Man, I think I'd have a stroke if this were me.
There again, it is. It was for me.
Okay, off camera, it was stressful. Like I didn't film that, but yeah, I was worried because I'm like, man, what are we gonna do? Like, we're gonna be out in the middle of nowhere. Who do we call? Because this is our first trip. Like, we're not experienced at this. We just figured out how to charge at home. That's another question that I'm going to ask you later. But yeah, it was a little stressful. But once we did it and we realized, you know what, worst case scenario, we can always, call and get a vehicle. We're already at a Chevy dealership, so we could figure something out. Or we just go back where we were. And we just made sure that we had enough range from where we were to always double back if we needed to. Tennessee Eco Man says, you can always put a generator in the truck bed. It's not bad if you charge at home.
Yeah, you could.
We had talked about that, like a solar panel generator. All right. CR Speed Auto Reviews says, thanks for the info. God bless and safe travels. I'm in Northeast Texas. We travel to Seadrift, where we have a little fishing house, and love to visit Port Aransas every year. Yes, we go to Port A quite a bit. Would you mind, Alex Sargent says, would you mind posting links to the rims and tires you put on and if they affected your range much. I have a premium and do not like the rims. Yours looks great.
Now, you probably won't see as big of a difference because you're already supposedly losing. I think Ford claims 20 miles, so it's probably more than that of range just by the rims and tires they put on them because of the extra weight. Because they have 22-inch rims on that truck stock, so it probably won't be as big as of a difference. Like I said, with mine, I literally went from 1.7 to 1.5 average, but my truck still shows I'm averaging 1.7. So take with that what you want, because I'm talking about like when this trip driving from my house to work and back, it's usually about 1.5, sometimes 1.6, depending on the day. But my truck is still saying I'm averaging 1.7. So I don't really know. Definitely Ford is not correct, at least with the truck. The Mustangs I've seen closer to what they claim, but the trucks are definitely wrong. And if you calculate, like if you tell it you're going on a trip and you use your Ford navigation and tell it, hey, I'm driving here, it will recalculate that. So like when we started that trip, it said I had 325 miles of range. When I did the trip, it recalculated it to 268. And that was actually a lot more accurate to what we actually got. So if you use the navigation, you can trust it pretty good. But yeah, definitely don't go on what it's claiming, because it's not, even with the stock rims and tires, it's not what they claim you're going to get for sure.
All right. So one other question is, from day one when you bought the Lightning, how did you charge it? Like, could you go home and plug something in? Did you have to buy cords? Did it come with cords? Like, what did day one look like of coming home with it?
So the first thing I would say is if you're planning on buying an EV, at least go on Amazon. You can buy a charger for a couple $100. Figure out what kind of dryer plug you have. At least invest in something like that, so when you bring it home, you have a way to charge it at home. Because you can buy them, and again, you're going to have to make sure that you get the right plug, because there are different kinds depending on the age of your house. But they have a bunch of chargers on there that you can get. They're like $200 to $300 that have the right. You got to get the right connector. It's not the Tesla charger. It's the one of the GM and Ford and all the rest of them are using. I can't remember what it's called. But then invest in that. So when we bought the truck, I wasn't planning on buying one because that was $85,000 truck. And so I had pretty much given up on it. I was just going to keep, I had lifted my truck not that long before that. I had already had it for a bunch of years. I still had pretty low miles on it. I was just going to keep it. But then all these incentives hit, and that truck dropped like 30 grand in price because of all the incentives and positive equity and everything else. So we weren't planning on buying one. So I hadn't bought charger. I hadn't bought anything. So the truck I bought, and not all of them are going to, but the truck I bought came with a charger from Ford that either plugged into a 110 socket or could plug into a dryer socket. It wasn't the right plug for my house because it was the newer style. Our house was built in 68, 69, something like that. So I tried to get adapters to make that work. Tried to use the 110 plug, which is super slow. It's like 1 kilowatt hour an hour. So that's, unless you're just driving, around town a little bit, that's not going to keep up. The dryer plug is closer to like 4, 5, 6. So it, for what I drive, it would keep up. It would charge overnight. But come to find out, that plug was actually defective from Ford. So I tried all these other things, talked to Ford a bunch about it. They kind of hem-hawed about, maybe it's your electrical system. Had an electrician come look. He couldn't figure out what was going on with it. Finally went back to Ford and plugged into their wall. Was like, hey, let me try this into your wall. So I plugged into one of their 110 outlets on the wall. Didn't work. So the guy was like, oh, okay, maybe it is defective. So 2 weeks of stressing about that.
And what did you do in the meantime for that?
There are 2 fast charging stations in our town, one of which was broken the entire time. I don't know if it's since been fixed. And that one's only at like 50 kilowatt hours an hour, so it's still not super fast. So basically I was going and topping off at that in the evening after work.
Which still would have been faster than doing the plug in the garage. Or that's the one that wasn't working.
No, neither one of the plugs worked.
Oh, neither of them worked. Okay.
And then I had the electrician came and looked. He couldn't figure. Of course, nothing was wrong with my house, so he couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. It was actually the plug. And basically, I forced the issue at Ford because I'd read multiple people had posted that they had the same problem, that the plug wasn't working. So then Then I started charging because Ford actually gives you, they did anyways with my truck. If you bought it a 2023 extended range F-150, they gave you, it's like a $1,500 charger, 80 amp. It's a nice charger. So my
Like the
plan,
wall charger, not the type you plug in, but the one that
it's hardwired
plug
in,
to
and
in.
it's hardwired in. It charges at almost 17 kilowatts an hour, kilowatt hours an hour, which we have now installed. Um, and so I wanted to do that. So I didn't want to spend the money on the Amazon one. But then getting an electrician to come do it, and do we really want to spend the money to upgrade our box to all the things that we're going to have to do to make that thing work? So in the interim, finally, we did buy one off Amazon. It worked fine.
How much was it?
I think it was like $300. I can't remember exactly. We can find it and link it or something, but it wasn't bad, and it was the right dryer plug. So it fit my dryer. Still works to this day, and it worked just fine. But anyway, so then basically, then in the meantime of that, I was using the 110 plug, charging it, and it would kind of half top it off a little bit, and then when it would get low enough, on the weekends we were taking it to Ford, because our Ford, they don't have the fast chargers yet to charge you. It was free, so they have like the smaller. I think they do like 6 kilowatts hours an hour. So we would basically just go drop it off on the weekend and charge it for free, which is pretty cool, But then when I actually figured out how cheap it was to charge at my house, how little our power company charges, it's like, this is not worth the time of running over there. So that's when I bought the Amazon one. And then finally when the electrician came and redid, so we only had a 70 amp service. So to the house period. So an 80 amp, you obviously couldn't add an 80 amp charger onto that. So had to totally redo the box, totally get a new service installed, which it needed it anyways. It was old. I mean, it was the original with the house. So, and it was outside. So it looked horrible.
And how much did that cost to have the electrician come out, fix our electricity, and install the new charger?
It was almost $5,000. And that's running a whole new line for the charger. Again, a whole new service, whole new breaker box, your new panel, all new breakers. And then I also got him to install a hookup for a generator. So I have the quick disconnect and all that stuff for that. So it was a lot. I mean, and I got a few bids. A lot of them were higher than that.
Like double.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a pretty good deal. He's a guy that Ford. He's related to one of the guys at Ford. They recommended him, so I think he, tries to be fair about it. But he did a good job. But so yeah, that's gonna, depending on what you need done, it could be more than that or it could be less. I mean, it just depends on what. And I don't think they're still getting out the chargers. You can still buy it. Like I said, it's like $1,380 or something like that on Ford's website for the one I'm talking about. But it's pretty cool. I mean, you plug it in, it connects to the app too. You can control how many amps you want it to have available. It's a nice charger. Again, for being able to charge at home, it's kind of, you need that. I wouldn't plan on using the Ford plug or trying to use stuff around town if you don't have a way to charge at your house, unless you're driving like barely anywhere and you like hanging out at the mall kind of thing. Because there's so we've seen that a lot too when we go to the city, go to San Antonio. There's a lot of Teslas around that area, and there's a bunch of people that live in these apartments on the rim, and so they'll park their cars. And I've talked to a couple of them even, and that's what they do. And that's, they just basically on the weekend go get dinner and charge up on the weekend, and they drive it the rest of the week. And but for practicality of it, it's a whole different ballgame if you can actually charge it at your house. So research what you're doing, test drive them, and don't let people tell you that they're impractical or you can't make it work, or don't let people make it political, because it shouldn't be. This is America. You should have the freedom to drive whatever you want to drive. If you want to drive a big gas jacked up diesel, then do it. If you want to drive an electric vehicle for whatever reason you want to do it, then do it. Don't let somebody tell you shouldn't. That's the biggest thing with me. Trust me, we live in small town Texas. I get tons of crap about it all the time, but I like the truck. And if something happened to this one, I would buy another one and do exactly what I've done to it. The trade-off for me is totally worth it.
I would say go test drive one first before you form your uninformed opinion.
Yeah.
Because I actually, the reason why we got the Lightning was because I was looking at a Mach-E, the Mustang EV vehicle, and I was too upside down in my Bronco to trade it in. So we kind of gave up on that hunt. And then we bought so many vehicles from our Ford house here that they call us every once in a while and say, "Hey, we got this thing in. Do you want to come look at it?" Because they like our trade-ins because we keep good care of our vehicles. Anyway, so he called us up and said, "Hey, I got a Lightning. Y'all want to look at a truck? If you trade in your truck, you know, it's going to be a great deal." So Chad didn't even want to do it, but we get there and Chad's like, "This is just too good of a deal to pass up. Like it makes so much sense to try it." And so since we've already test drove the Mach-E to begin with, we kind of had an idea of it because we took it for like a weekend, like we took it Saturday and brought it back Sunday or whatever it was.
It was a long weekend. It was like
Yeah.
4 or 5 days.
And we took it to like one of the slow chargers in town. There's one in our parking lot by Chick-fil-A. So we figured we wanted to try like what does plugging look like not at home because we didn't have anything to charge in the Mustang. So we figured that out. It's really not that difficult once you do it once, just like riding a bike. Once you figure it out, you're fine. But when you don't know what you're doing, you're like, is it working? You don't know. Do I have to tap? Do I have to put my card in? Does it already know who I am? You download the app of whatever plugin you're using out in public. Like just download that app. That makes your life so much simpler. So since we've already kind of had that experience, we knew that if we did take this truck home the day we bought it, it was like, we know how to charge it. We know where to charge it. Also, there are apps that tell you where you can go charge. So, surprise announcement. We are now the proud owners of 2 EV vehicles. So, after dealing with the truck and realizing that, we can do this, I wanted a Mach-E, and so I knew that whatever I was getting, and I would recommend this, no matter what you get the extended range of whatever that vehicle offers. So I didn't care about any of the bells and whistles, although the bells and whistles are very nice. I really wanted extended range because I didn't want to deal with, the fear of running out of gas, running out of juice. I don't know what you would want. Power. So anyway, so in the next video, we'll show you a walkthrough of the Mach-E and what all we've learned thus far. I've had it 2 weeks now, maybe 3, about the end of May. So now we're in a total EV family. The only gas vehicles we have, not even our lawnmowers are gas.
Nope.
Are motorcycles. So we do have some gas vehicles, but yeah. Anything on the inside that you want to talk about?
No, I mean it's basically it's just an F-150. That's one of the things I like about it over like the Cybertruck, and it's not a statement. So that vehicle, and they we've seen a few of the foundations up close. In fact, there's one when we charged the other day with the Mach-E at that Tesla charger, there was a guy that pulled in with one that was wrapped white. It was nice. They're nice trucks, but they're a statement. They're different. The F-150 is an F-150. I mean, and it is. I think it's the nicest F-150 I've seen interior wise. Maybe the Raptor R. I've been in one of those, but it's just a nice truck. So, but it's not like an F-150. It's like driving a nice fancy F-150. So, and they're not unless people know what they're looking at. Well, like most people,
they don't know.
They have no idea. Yeah, they have no idea. And so that's kind of a cool thing too, because I'm not trying to act like I'm saving the world. There's all kinds of stuff you can look at with that on that they're not, and depending on where you're charging, there can be more pollutant with that. So that's the thing. We didn't buy them to go through all that of what, think that we're somehow saving the planet by driving an EV. But I mean, I was amazed by how much when you are then around like a gas vehicle again, how much the smell and the heat that they put off and all this stuff that you don't have with an electric vehicle. That you just don't realize that exists, but you notice it after you've been away from it for a while. So, yeah, I don't do it because we think it's going to save the planet or anything like that, or it's going to all gas vehicles are going to go away or anything like that. It's just we've enjoyed them.
Charging at home.
Yeah, the convenience of charging at home. It is way cheaper. There's no maintenance, and they're nice. They have a lot of features that a lot of the other vehicles don't have. So, I don't know. Again, you have to drive them. I was absolutely against them until I went and visited my brother. I was one of those people that was like, oh, I'd never own one of those. You know, those are stupid. And, but then my brother has a Tesla, and you know, being in that, seeing the power, seeing the way he charges it, all that kind of stuff, and I was like, okay, that's actually kind of cool. Let me look into that. Did a ton of research on it. Still didn't know all the answers. Still had to learn, and still learning too. But so far, we've enjoyed the journey, and so far, you know, they've been good vehicles. We'll see. Payments didn't change much at all. But there again, if I would have bought an $86,000 truck, my payments would definitely change, and then that difference of gas price, you know, it would have balanced out, equaled out, you know. So insurance went up like $30, I think.
10 bucks a month over the 6-month policy.
Okay, so there you go. So that didn't really change. Which they claim they're actually safer because you, in a normal vehicle, they have to protect you from the motor like a head-on collision. But that thing that's just space up front, so they're able to make a lot more crumple zones. So it's supposedly the safest F-150 to have. There's a lot less risk of rollover because all the weight's down low underneath your feet. So, but one of the things Ford was doing, and I'm not sure if they're still doing it, is they had plans to build a battery recycling plant. So that's one of the things people say is, oh, well, what happens when the batteries go bad and you just have to throw those in the trash? Well, if you've ever read on the battery package, you're not supposed to throw batteries away. So, but they realize that it's not going to be the entire battery pack that's going to fail. It'll be certain blocks, certain sections of it. So they can basically test those sections. So you sell those batteries back to Ford. They refurbish them, and they can sell you at a reduced rate refurbished batteries that will go back into your vehicle. Or if you're thinking about being green and everything with it, you know, having the ability to recycle those batteries, refurbish them, reuse them, and not, you know, throw them away is a pretty cool thing as well. So it takes out, because again, mining the cobalt and all the things that go in those batteries is very pollutant. So that's where, you know, but so is getting oil, so is, you know, refining metals, everything. None of it's 100% green. None of it's perfect. That's why, like I said, don't make it political. Don't make it about those kinds of things. Drive what you want to drive. But don't just assume that you know. Test drive one, like Jenny said. Test drive it. See what you really think. Do your research. Don't listen to what everybody else says, because it's like everything in life. People stick in their little corner and believe what they want to believe, and they won't ask questions or reason for themselves. So anyway.
Closing statements? That's it?
No, just, you know, glad you guys are enjoying the content. If there's anything else that you want to, you know, see on the vehicles or learn about the vehicles, or, you know, any other adventures you'd like us to take you on, we've got some trips coming up as well that we're going to put on here. But, you know, just comments, feedback, you know, whatever you guys want to see. You want to see more of me? Then let us know. All right, I'll talk to you later.